Welcome back, movie lovers. I'm Josh.
I'm Chris.
And with our powers combined, we are Garner Brothers Movie Lovers. We are back today after a long hiatus of not recording for no reason. But we had to review this movie.
One reason was we haven't seen a whole lot of movies.
That's true.
We were kind of in the doldrums.
The beginning of the year is a hard time for movies, but we had to review this one. Today we're talking Paul Rudd and the amazing kaleidoscope of tripping balls. Antman and the Wasp and the Quantumania or whatever. So it's the third Antman movie, and Paul Rudd is, living life after Endgame. And his daughter's like, "You're the worst. And you're useless. And I don't even like you." And he's like, "Whoa." She's like, "Didn't mean it like, I'm sorry. But you are the worst." And then she sends them to the quantum zone.
And it's real weird down there. Ant-Man and the whole family are trapped down in the quantum zone. Quantum realm.
Sure.
Is it called the quantum realm? It's a realm,
It's
I
the
think.
kaleidoscope.
It's definitely Wonderland or something like it. The film is directed by, scored by, and starring the same people that were in the previous films, except for Michael Pena. Is that his friend who isn't in this one?
Oh yeah,
His
like
Latino
the
friend.
funniest part
Yeah,
of the
he's
other
like
ones?
the best part of the other movies, and he's not even in this one.
What the heck?
That's really sad.
Yeah,
Maybe sometime toward the beginning they could have had him do one of his funny little monologue things.
That would have been a breath of fresh air.
Yeah,
They also
yeah.
changed the actress who plays Cassie.
I'd be pretty mad if I was that Endgame actress. She
Yeah.
did fine in that role in
Yeah.
Endgame. But this one did fine. I mean,
she was fine. They wrote her really unlikable at the beginning of that movie. All she did was like talk crap about her dad,
yeah.
and then she'd be like, "Sorry." Then she'd talk crap about him again.
Well, and he's like at the beginning is when he's reading his book, like Cassie's his whole life,
Yeah,
Like, he just loves her so much, and she's just so disappointed in him.
For what reason?
Because he hasn't saved the world lately, I guess. I don't know what she wants him to be doing.
She's like, I don't know. He's not in jail anymore. Like, he's living his life right. He saved the world. She's just like, "Ugh, Dad. Why are you the worst dad?"
Of course, this film introduces Jonathan Majors' character, Kang the Conqueror, from, he was at the very end of the Loki TV series, and now this is a different version of that same character, a different multiverse version of that character. Was there anything about the movie you enjoyed?
I liked Jonathan Majors as Kang for the most part. I like him as Kang. How about you?
Paul Rudd is one of the most charismatic actors ever.
Yeah.
He's really easy to like. He's always been this, breezy, affable, very likable part of the MCU. I've never been a huge fan of any of the Ant-Man films. This one is fine. He's always likable. So that's good. Jonathan Majors did fine. There were some funny things. I laughed sometimes.
Yep, there was
while
some
we
funny
watched
stuff.
it.
Mostly everything you're going to see as far as like the action goes is not new compared to anything we've seen from him before. He'll get bigger and then he'll get smaller and they'll get really, really small and then they'll get bigger while they're really small and then they'll make other things bigger and other things smaller. I did like when the Wasp had little Ant-Man in her hand and she threw him.
And then he got big with that momentum.
So he got thrown with the momentum of someone 100 times bigger than him, but then he became 100 times bigger than her. So you had this enormous monster, human cannonball going at a crazy speed. That was a cool use.
Yeah,
of
that's a
the
good
power.
idea.
And that was the only time I felt that way about anyone's abilities or action sequences.
Yeah, I agree.
So another thing I liked is that Cassie, they've been introducing and kind of replacing a lot of superheroes. They'll just like bring in someone else and that person is just like
Super
better.
amazing right away.
Yeah, whereas in this movie, Cassie has the same abilities as Ant-Man, but she's not very good at
But
it.
she's not as good. That's
She's
true.
learning. You see Scott Lang try to teach her, and he tries to coach her through it, and then you see her at the finale of the movie figure out how to do that. And so I liked that too.
So one other thought I have about this movie that I think is funny is the tomato meter score. I don't think that this movie is significantly worse
Then the rest of Phase 4,
than Phase 4.
but it's way lower.
But yeah, the only thing from Phase 4 that has a lower tomato meter score is the Eternals.
I don't think these scores are wrong, though. I don't think the Eternals tomato meter score or
No.
this. I think the rest of the movies just
No.
and
Thor's-
TV shows need to be brought
Thor's
down.
is way too high, and
Yeah.
Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is way too high. This movie I don't feel like is significantly worse than those films. And that's why, like, that's what I wanted to point out. Like, if you just look at the tomato meter, you might think, wow, this movie is significantly worse than a lot of the Phase 4 movies that were not that great. But actually, it feels just the same to me. This film does not feel significantly worse than Marvel Phase 4. It does not feel any better than those, except maybe for the fact that it is finally introducing something that's going to, like, actually
Connect
move
the rest of the stories.
the overall universe, forward for once.
You know, they said something, and it seemed like a missed opportunity. There's a part in the movie where Kang says to Antman,
You're an Avenger.
and you're like, oh, he knows who the Avengers are. And then he says,
Have I killed you before?
and I was like, that's interesting. And then he says,
You're not the one with the hammer.
and he's like,
That's Thor. We get confused a lot. Similar body types.
that was a good joke.
Yes.
But also, I thought about that for a second, and I thought, what if Thor 4 was a movie where the whole time we were watching a Thor from a different part of the multiverse, but we didn't know that. And at the end, he just gets murdered brutally by Kang. And Kang was the antagonist in that movie, you know? And then that's the reveal at the end. So when he says that to Ant-Man, it would have, like, I don't know. Couldn't have been worse than Thor 4 that we got.
No.
And it would have done something to help build this character of Kang that we have. Interesting to see something like that happen. Or they could have done that with this movie and Ant-Man, where at the end, Ant-Man does die, you know? And he kind of foreshadows it at the beginning. He says, have I killed you before? And then he kills him at the end, and that's why Cassie's a different person.
That would have made a lot of sense.
So, they tried to do an end game in this movie, but it was a little bit more like a Rise of the Skywalker, where they have the big battle at the end, and throughout the battle at the end, all these characters show up that are supposed to give you these swelling emotions of music swells and the pictures are incredible, and you're like, yeah, I don't care about ants though, so this isn't cool. Or
yeah.
somebody will die, and it's someone they introduced and had one scene with earlier, and you're like, yeah, but the mason jar head guy, I don't care about him. So I don't care. And that's how most of those moments are. There was one moment where the Wasp comes in at like the last moment, and it was cool. But that's because we kind of know that person, and like the consequences of her in that moment were significant. But for the most part, these moments that were supposed to be epic and grand and were just shallow and meaningless. And that's kind of this movie. I think a specific moment that was kind of a good example of this, the ants, it happened twice. They had that moment where it was like, the ants came to save us. Twice! The first time it happens, Hank Pym shows up, and Ant-Man's like, are these your ants? And he's like, yes, they went through a time loop, and now they're super ants. And I was like...
It took them 1,000 years longer to get here than us, for some reason.
And there's... Anyway, and they're super ants now, and they all have, like, helmets and lasers or something.
And they can live for 1,000 years.
They're laser ants.
Laser sharks.
and when that moment happened, you could tell that, like, it was supposed to be awesome. It was so dumb. And then they have the ants come again at the end of the movie. And it's supposed to be, Gandalf coming down the hill in the two towers, and it's like, no, it's not.
No, it's
This
not.
is just the ants again. It wasn't cool the first time, and it's still not cool. A very good isolated example of this is one where Cassie breaks this girl out of Kang jail. And when she does, she takes out like 3 guards, Cassie does, and then gets the jail cell open. One of the guards starts to come back, but he's mostly unconscious. He's still laying on the ground, and he's like, "Brr." And then the other girl kicks him in the head, and Cassie's like, "Whoa, you are so cool."
Even though she just took
And I
out
was
3
like,
guards.
What? You can't just like tell us that she's cool and that means she's cool. All she did was kick an unconscious guy in the head. You haven't given us anything to believe that these things are cool and will give us these emotional swelling things. You're just handing us these things that you say are cool, and then we look at them and we say, this is weird and I don't like it.
You're not going to care about any of the characters that are introduced in this movie, with the exception possibly of Kang. You're not going to care about anybody else. They don't give you long enough to... I mean, they introduce too many, and they don't give you long enough to... I mean, Bill Murray's in this movie, and you will not care.
Nope.
But that feels like just about everybody in the quantum realm. And I guess you can't get too attached to anybody down there because we're probably not going back to there ever again. So, so yeah, you have a movie that takes place in a place where stuff happens that will not affect anything. Also, this movie's not going to make sense. You should not expect it to make sense. They don't explain anything the way things are in the quantum realm. You get a vague idea of some of the politics and some of the like different factions that exist in the quantum realm, but not really.
And there's a really meta moment at the end of the movie where Ant-Man kind of lets us all... He tries to be aware that the movie makes no sense. And he's like, oh, life makes no sense, but don't think about it too hard. And that's kind of how the MCU is right now. It's just like, nothing makes sense. And don't think about it too hard.
Well, it's worse than just not making sense. Like, when they're in the quantum realm and stuff doesn't make sense, okay, because it's a really weird place, and we don't know the rules down there, and whatever, so we don't really care or understand what's going on. But when worse than not making sense is just contradicting things that you've already set up. Ant-Man already went to the quantum realm for 5 years, right? Isn't
Yep.
that where he was?
Mm-hmm.
And then he comes back, and he's like, yeah, but to me it felt like 5 hours, or whatever he says, yeah?
Right. Yep.
Except that Hope's mom was down there. Janet? Is her name Janet Van Dyne?
She was down there for 30 years.
She was down there for 30 years, and it apparently felt like 30 years.
Yep.
And apparently you can be falling through time into the quantum realm for 1,000 years if you're an ant, and live that time. And then
An
get
ant
to the
who
bottom.
fell into the quantum zone at the same time as you.
Right. But the ant took 1,000 years longer. Anyway, there's just no internal consistency to any of it. Also, why ants are really smart and are building their own technology.
They don't
Also-
explain that at all. He just says it.
Yeah.
Again. Also, the part where they're sitting around a table and he's like, wait, what are you guys doing? And then Hank Pym's like, science. And Ant-Man's like, "Buh? You mean this scientist, is working on science?" And then he's like, ant science. And then he audibly says, I don't believe you. You don't believe that Ant-Man is working on ant science? That's all he's ever done. So, yeah. Nothing makes sense. Nothing's consistent. There's a part at the end. This is a little part. I mean, this happens all the time. But at the end, Kang gets real mad, and he goes down to the battle, and he is blasting people into
He's incinerating
seemingly
them.
nothing.
Yeah.
They're being
evaporating.
erased from time, maybe. Like, you don't know what his capabilities are, but he's blasting these dudes, and all of them instantly gone. Then 3 Ant-Mans show up. We're gonna fight you now. And he's like, well, wait a sec. I'm just gonna turn this to stun. Let's go! Boom! boom, 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 and they get blasted and they fly around.
Except it doesn't show him turn it to stun. It's just suddenly his blaster...
He doesn't say he turns it to stun. His blaster just doesn't
It just stops
incinerate them.
disintegrating people.
So that's convenient
Yeah.
for the heroes.
It's also nice that he forgot that he can just control people's bodies and make them do whatever he wants them to do, which he was doing earlier in the film. I can already see the pitch meeting.
It also seems like the helmet that they gave him is just squishing his face whenever he's got the blue part on. He just kind of looks like this the whole time. And he tries to look scary and imposing, but his face is just getting squished. Ah! So I don't love that design.
So if you're on the fence about going to see this movie...
Gosh dang it, don't see it. If you're not on the
really
fence...
don't have to.
If you're not on the fence and you really like Ant-Man, and you're really excited for this movie, still don't see this movie.
I think you'll like it. If you liked the other Ant-Man...
Actually,
movies,
the
you'll
first
probably
half of this
be fine.
movie, I didn't have anything I hated about it. I was going through it, and I remember thinking to myself, I don't know why this has such a terrible tomato meter score. This isn't, like, that bad. But the last half of that movie really, really unravels. It just falls apart. We haven't even mentioned MODOK yet.
Oh, he's awful.
He is exactly everything you're afraid he will be.
He is horrible.
It is the
he
worst.
Looks awful.
He is super jarring to look at.
Yeah.
It is supposed to be funny, but he's also supposed to be scary. He's not tonally
But
consistent.
He's not funny or
and
scary.
It's just. Oh my
So the
gosh.
problem is, if you've never heard of MODOK, he will unnerve you. If you're a big fan of MODOK,
There's
you
no-
will hate what they do with him.
No
in
one's
this
a big
movie.
fan of MODOK though. There's
Some
no-
people are. MODOK's got his own show. Like, there are some people
Yeah, the stop motion show.
Yeah, there are some people who love the character of MODOK, and what
But
they
not-
could have done with him is not what they do with him in this, and you're gonna hate it if you
Yeah.
like MODOK.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I guess if there's people out there who like MODOK, that's fine. But I don't believe it. Well, maybe we should rate this. All right, so it's time for Good, Fine, Bad.
Good. Fine. Good. Bad.
Fine.
That's bad. That's bad. That's bad.
Everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
you know, I'm gonna say it was fine.
Okay. Yeah,
You're gonna say it's bad.
it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah, I didn't dislike it as much as you. I think it's okay. Like, I'm not excited about it, but I wouldn't say go see it in theaters. I'd say, you know, if you want to watch it, wait for it to go on Disney Plus. It'll be on Disney Plus in a month or two, and then watch it there. And
All right, so yeah, we don't recommend seeing it, but we do recommend that you like this video. So let's do some spoils before we close out. There's not enough to make a separate video, and also every time we decide to make a separate video, I just don't edit the video. I just give up. I'm done with this.
all right.
So we're just gonna do a short spoiler section starting now.
Let me point out one thing that I think is fun for Jonathan Majors.
Okay.
He gets to play a different character
Oh yeah.
in every movie and every TV series. Like, here's the thing. I expected Kang the Conqueror to get out of the quantum realm and become the big bad.
I thought for sure.
But he doesn't.
No.
That version of him dies. That means it could be that you could beat Kang in every movie, but you'll always get a new Kang. And each of them could be distinct characters, right? And so,
I did like though that he was like one that the rest of them rejected.
yeah.
And I kind of hoped that he would get out, you know, and he would be able to conquer all the other conquerors, and he'd be like the most imposing one or something. But
Yeah.
I guess we're just gonna have a bunch of them.
We'll see. We'll have to see what they do with that. But
It's also possible that he comes back because
anyone can come
they
back.
just do that. Even though the
Anytime.
other one said that he was dead.
One thing that I was a little disappointed with, Kang the Conqueror in the quantum realm, his motivation is revenge on the other kings who, like, banished him there. And it just didn't feel like, I mean, this is the new big bad in the MCU. Thanos' reason just seemed like so much better to me than I want revenge. Like, I want to conquer everything because that's what I do, and now I want revenge because they banished me here, and it's fine. I mean, he did well with the part they wrote for him. It's just like I wanted him to be a little more nuanced, or like I don't know, have a little more character than that. But maybe other versions of that character will have more nuance and different motivations. I don't know.
If they were able to bring back the one from the Loki series somehow, his whole like reason for doing everything was the most wholesome, I think.
Yeah,
King
that was
can
very
get.
interesting. Yeah, but he died, right?
Yeah, but what happens when a king dies?
I don't know. There's a bunch more. But maybe no one like that one.
Some of them wear silly pharaoh hats that make it so they can't move their neck. So here's my biggest problem with the way the movie ends.
Mhm.
There's a line that was a good line where Kang is beating the living poop out of Ant-Man, and he says, "You thought you could win." Scott like turns back and says, "I don't have to win, we just both have to lose." And then he takes all the stuff and he sticks it on the core, and like in that moment
And nothing happens.
the consequences are pretty clear when he says he's losing, and before, when that thing got destroyed, they were stuck in the quantum realm. So
When that thing got destroyed in the exact same way, a handful of those thingamajiggers slammed into it,
Yep.
made it grow huge and shatter, and yeah. But that didn't happen this time.
so when that happens, it's clear to you in the moment he is giving up his life outside of the quantum zone to save his family.
Kang's trying to get
Kang
through the
turns
portal.
around and he runs to the portal, and then the Wasp comes out and she starts blasting him, and then you're like, oh my gosh, it's now she's stuck there too. It was kind of an impactful moment because of that. The consequences were really dire.
Yeah,
and it was
and
big.
you're thinking, wow, these two are stuck here now, and how are what's going to be the consequence?
And then they defeat Kang, and he gets sucked into lights, and then the portal just opens up.
Cassie just figures out how
Cassie
to open
just
up the portal.
pulls out
from
her
the other
computer and
side.
she's like clickety clackety click, and then it's like whoop whoop, and she just opens the portal.
And Ant-Man's totally unsurprised, and he's like, "Let's go."
He's like he was expecting it the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a
no
silly,
consequences
silly way to end.
at all. It is just that like it doesn't mean anything.
Well, and because of that, and because this Kang got defeated, really, this movie is absolutely unnecessary
Yep.
in the MCU timeline.
Like Kang didn't get out,
Right.
so whatever.
Whatever indeed.
There was a moment too in the movie where, you know, the buildings are alive or whatever. I could tell they wanted you to care about the building because there's a part at the end where in the background you see one of the buildings holding the other building while it's dying.
I didn't
with its
even notice
arms.
that.